Hi, Bernhard.
Hi, Carsten.
What do we do today?
Yeah, so in this one, we will enable insights to monitor Azure Virtual Desktop, right? So when you have a host pool or when you have a presence in Azure Virtual Desktop, you definitely want to see how the system behaves, how the performance is, get some counters on the individual desktops, and maybe also do some diagnosing when you run into issues. Okay.
Mhm.
So basically, the starting point for configuring this is the official website with the same title as the session, and it describes pretty much the steps that you need to do. I want to highlight some of the prerequisites, which is you need to have an Azure Virtual Desktop environment. Okay, that's easy. Next
Check.
one is you need to have a log analytics workspace. If you don't have one, then it's relatively simple to create one, right? Log analytics is being built by the data that is sort of stored within this workspace. So be a little bit careful on how much data you store and how much data you gather, right, throughout that
Mhm.
process. And then, log analytics workspace is nothing specific to a AVD, right? It's an Azure and generic Azure service that is being used by a lot of other services and can be used as a destination for the data, right? Um, However, the Azure Virtual Desktop environment has some setup steps that are specific to make the data flow into the log analytics workspace, right?
Mhm.
Basically, then we do have already a log analytics workspace as we've been using that in the previous or in some of the previous videos. And the setup experience, I think, is maybe interesting to show because there's a lot of documentation there, but it lacks a little bit of the screenshots and maybe, some of the screens and some of the configuration can mislead a little bit, to be honest. So let's do it, right? The starting point is for me by copying that URL and putting it into the um, session that is already, authenticated. So I'm logged onto your portal. So I do have a valid authentication context. Now I open up another browser tab and drop the link that I've copied from before into the new browser tab, right? And we are sort of navigated to that monitoring or to that insights piece at the bottom in the Azure Virtual Desktop pane here. And it depends a little bit on whether you have configured insights already for Azure Virtual Desktop or not, right? So the look and feel here may differ a little bit depending on whether you have played with it before or not, right?
Mhm.
However, so what it brings up or should display is the number of host pools that are currently available in that system. However, if you click through these dialogues here, it may not show a lot of, information because we haven't configured it right away, right? So we may not even use maybe the utilization, or we may get some data, but maybe not all of it. So let's configure it. Okay, so let's go back to the overview point.
Mhm.
And there's one interesting thing because in the documentation, it says, hey, go to your workbooks, check the configuration, right? But it's definitely hard to find these ones, right? Took me a little bit, but you need to scroll down all the way to the bottom here, right? And see, there you have that configuration workbook, which you need to click on, right? Because it brings up some different sort of validation piece, and maybe here's the page for doing the actual settings.
Okay.
Okay, maybe let me explain a little bit how the data gathering process works, right? So we have set one of the requirements is a log analytics workspace, which is the side or the store at the Azure side, which receives the data, right? Then we do have the host pools, which are the desktops, right? But there needs to be, somebody or something that gathers the data on these desktops. And that is done through agents. So that is basically done through the Azure Monitoring Agent, right? So you may have heard that we have already a log analytics agent, but that's sort of forget about it because it's deprecated already. So we need to make sure that the Azure Monitoring Agent is installed on every session host. How can we check that? Well, let me go back to my Azure subscription. Let's go to the host pool, which we are going to configure, right? So let's maybe take this guy here. We see that it consists of 2 machines. Let's see which machines these are, right? So they are called C2D, blah, 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 0 and
cluster
1.
2 and desktop 1, you remember.
Yeah. So
cool
let's
naming,
try.
right?
Yeah. So let's try to see, to find these ones, right? I can't click on these ones because it would not bring me to the right navigation. But what we need to do is to go to our Azure Arc pane and then go for machines. And under here, we should see our desktop machines. So I think it was these 2 ones, right?
Yeah.
And we want to make sure that the Azure Monitoring Agent is installed. And the AMA is an extension that should be listed under the extensions here, right? And as you see, it's the one here. And so this means you have already the data gathering software on this desktop. Where does it
as
come
of
from?
now, Bernhard? You want to explain it? Okay, go on.
Yeah. So where does it come from? Well, you may see by looking at the other extensions, you may be, remembering back at the time when we were creating the session hosts and the host pool and using the Azure Portal for creating that AVD environment. This was one part of the setup. So the Azure Monitoring Agent comes with the setup of the session hosts, right? Which is easy. And so we don't need to take care about that. But you wanted to say something.
No,
All good?
exactly. While we were deploying the session host, the last step was the Azure Monitoring Agent. I remember. Maybe that will change in the future, depending on when you watch this. But as of now, it's done through the deployment of the session host.
Okay, so now you know what AMA stands for. It's the Azure Monitoring Agent configuration, right? So this is the page to tell the Azure Monitoring Agent, which is already running, what to gather, where to send it to, right? And that's basically the purpose of this here. Okay, so we are selecting our log analytics workspace, and this is the one that you have pre-created, right? It can be any log analytics workspace, right? The main idea behind is not to have too many of them, right? Because it might be a little bit difficult for you then to remember which one has the correct logging data, right? Okay, then if we have selected the log analytics workspace, we can configure the host pool, right? And this is sort of, gathering the host pool's data to gather which kind of information we want to have from the host pool to be gathered, right? By the namings here on the right-hand side, you could see which kind of things will be tracked, right? And that kicks off another sub-deployment, if you will, and configures the host pool to gather that kind of information that we wanted to have. Okay. Same thing applies to the workspace. Maybe you want also to configure the workspace, right? So this is the view that the user gets. You may also want to gather some data there and send it over to the log analytics workspace, right? Okay, so this deployment is in progress. After that has been finished, let's do a refresh and see if the visualization changes here. Okay, so you could see after refresh, the settings have been done and are matched, or sort of visualized here in that view. Okay, so let's go to the session host data settings. Because that's the next thing that we want to configure, right? So there are, for example, first of all, you need to have a data collection rule. Data collection rule defines the kind of event logs you want to gather, for example, from the individual session hosts, or performance monitor counters, like how much CPU, how much memory do I have, what is my disk IO, for example, right? So these are all parameters which can be sort of specified in a data collection rule. You don't need to come up with a data collection rule by yourself. It will be created for you with the required information, not too few, but not too many, right? Because think about it, if you gather too many data, your log analytics workspace will grow, and hence the costs that you need to spend will grow as well, right? So by using the data collection rules that come with the system, you keep it sort of, to a reasonable amount and useful data. Okay, so let's do, the workspace definition or destination is our log analytics workspace. And we want to have for that specific, AVD resource group, right? I think we put it into the, the one that comes with the cluster, right? So let's do the data collection rule.
No, we have our, AVD. You're right.
Okay.
Perfect.
And that triggers off, another deployment, or that tells Azure, the Azure Resource Manager, that there should be, another data collection rule to be generated. So let's do that. That seems to be okay. Now we can select it, hopefully after a while. So let's, after refresh, now it comes up as Microsoft AVD West Europe, right? So there is a, sort of naming that is being diced out by the system, or by the configuration page here. And these, so now we do have a data collection rule, right? But you need to associate that data collection rule. So you have the definition for what has to be gathered, right? But you need to sort of tell the Azure monitoring agents on the session hosts that this data collection rule is for you, right? So you need to do an association to it, so that the local agents know which data to be gathered, right? So let's, sort of tying the things together. And once we've done that, the data will start flowing, and we should see our data coming in. Obviously, we need to do some log on and log off experience, right? So we need to simulate some users in order we can see something significant there, right? Another thing is, for example, if you would have session hosts that have no Azure Monitoring Agent, you would be seeing those at the bottom, right? This is definitely something which is not, you shouldn't see in that kind of environment, but it maybe is another another thing to watch out for if you are running into issues. Okay, so that should be it from that perspective. Now we have generated some artifacts. Maybe let me go back and see them. But before we do that, let's just refresh that page maybe one more time. Don't expect it to reflect a lot of changes, but let's see. I may be mistaken. if it already, sort of fills out some values at the top, which it does, right? So you could see that some of the things are here. And for example, we should see something maybe at the utilization to come in at a later point, right?
Mm-hmm.
So no information at the moment, because usually it takes a couple of minutes before the first data show up. So now let's see a little bit, the artifacts that have been generated. So I travel back to the host pools and select the one that I was configuring just a couple of minutes ago. And now under Insights, we should see at least, the view for that host pool, right? It may not show the data yet, but as said, as it's taking a little bit of time in order for the data to reflect, but that's sort of like a good visualization. So that seems, hey, the session hosts are in there, and the AMA, the Azure Monitoring Agent, is configured. The other thing is, let's see if we do have any diagnostic settings here. Right, so remember I was asked if I want to have maybe some additional data for troubleshooting purposes, for example, right? That could be if I want to troubleshoot connection issues or see any network data related things, or some auto scale information. Remember our auto scale or scaling plan videos that we did. All that is useful information which can be configured using that diagnostic settings there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was automatically done for us by running through that configuration or through the checking page earlier. Okay. Another thing which might be interesting is the data collection rules, for example, right? So we know that there was one created. I mistyped it, but that's not an issue. So we do have the Microsoft AVD West Europe data collection rule. If you ever have tapped in there, it's basically, telling the data sources is what do I want to gather from the machines, right? So Windows event logs, performance counters, which kind of performance counters. So you can play with it a little bit, but as said, it's already having enough information from the session hosts to give a good view back. Okay, and the resources, you should see the session hosts which are being selected by, right? And as our host pool has 2 session hosts, I see 2 entries here. Yeah, and that's basically if you ever need to, add another host or remove a host and do some operations or management work, then you can do so by using the add and remove button, for example, right? If you need to play with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think that is it from a configuration perspective. The other thing is maybe some other views that might be interesting is the Azure monitoring pane, where you can do the log queries, right? So where you can select or run these famous Custo queries, for example, right? If you want to figure out, for example, which kind of users are logged on to your Azure Virtual Desktop session, right? Or do we see any difficulties here? Because that's the counters that you get then later on, right? And basically take this as if the host pool, for example, is sending diagnostic data to the log analytics workspace, you can use Azure Monitoring and the logs query section, for example, to query that table, right, which is to get the AVD connections, basically. But before these ones are reporting back, probably we need to wait a couple of minutes longer to see other results of that, right? Yeah, and that I would say should conclude this video, or do you have other questions?
No, I think you prepared that. So we have to do that for every host pool, I assume, because
Yeah.
we configured only one. And the question I would have, but I don't know if you can answer it, if we add more session hosts to a host pool. So we only saw 2 session hosts.
Mhm.
So imagine or we deploy 6 more or 10 more.
Mhm.
Do we have to do you know if you have to go in and configure those 2, or are they automatically added to the logging?
Okay, to your question, right? So you were asking what happens if you add additional hosts to your session host pool,
Mhm,
right? What about the monitoring settings? Will they be automatically applied or not? So we started out with 2 session hosts in that host pool,
mhm.
right? And then we added 2 more, like these ones here at the
Yeah,
bottom, right?
with the ARM template, right?
Yep. And in order to check if these ones are being, automatically monitored, maybe we go into under the host pool under the Insights section here.
Mhm.
That's one piece where you can find out, and it probably tells you something like, "Hey, it's not configured," right? So
Yeah, but we did that, right?
yeah, that's what we did. So maybe we just, and click the link here at the bottom. And you know that page already. I mean, there is a different path to that page as well, which is, under the AVD general toolset insights. And then you need to scroll down to the bottom, and there's also the check AMA configuration kind of
Yeah.
page, right? However, these settings here appear to be correct. So we have all greens here, right? No worries. But the interesting piece is here. You need to click on the session host data, right? And if you go there, we should see that our corresponding resource group and the host pool that we want to look at, is already being pre-selected, right? But what
Yeah.
about the agents? And the not so nice thing here is that it doesn't take these values here, right? So we need to pre-select them one more time. We don't need to create another data collection rule because we already have one. The only thing here is it's not automatically selected, right?
Okay,
Was used.
that's a bit disturbing, I think.
Yeah,
If
I
you don't
think.
do that multiple times,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, just be aware. Whenever you set that up for the first time, a data collection rule is there. That's the thing where because the data collection rule defines which hosts it is assigned to,
Mhm.
right? So, and as you could see here, number 3 and 2, they are not assigned, and I can,
Yeah.
initiate the association to it directly from this portal.
Yeah.
However, there would be also another path, right? So there's in Azure, that is not only always a single way of achieving things, there are multiple ways of doing things, right? So I could go, for example, into the data collection roles. And under the resources here, I would see that I'm just configured or associated to these 2 hosts, right? So whether you go here and select the hosts that are missing, or if you go here and select them, I don't really care, right? It's just one way where you need to, make sure that you're adding the right ones. And then you're submitting the deployment and off you go. And after a couple of minutes, you should see the heart beating of these ones coming into the log analytics
Mhm.
workspace as well.
Okay, see you on the next one.
See you.